But first, you have to introduce yourself. That's going to be
I have to
interesting
introduce
too.
myself. Yes, I do. Yes. Who on earth am I, and why on earth have I decided to do a talk? Okay, so I'm going to do the second talk tonight, my first one actually, and I suppose it's a little bit good because this is actually the anniversary of setting up this meetup. Myself and Sinead put it all together in January last year. Wouldn't happen without you, Sinead, so thank you so much. But we are delighted that it has produced a community and people who come back and people who learn from it, and a whole series of really, really cool speakers like Christina. Now in Waterford, our city in Ireland, we are lucky to have a vibrant technology community. One of the events that I attended and spoke at last month in January was the Waterford Tech Meetup. It's an extremely well attended meetup because there's not very many others. In a small city, you tend to have a much more limited choice. But on the flip side, that's great because it always has really, really good attendance, and you kind of, it's like Cheers, you kind of know everybody there. Everybody knows your name, which is also nice. So I delivered this talk in the middle of January because I had foolishly committed to doing a demo of a chatbot. And if anybody has suffered from conference-driven development, you'll know that committing to do a talk for code that you haven't written is a great way to get that code written. And I'm just about managed to get it live and a demo up. So once again, making public commitments is a great way to get things done. It's a AI chatbot that uses retrieval augmented generation. And what that does is take all of the podcasts and turn them into a chatbot that you can talk to. Super fun to make. And we've been having some really, really cool feedback on it. It is actually live, and I'll give you the link in a while. We'll probably do a little bit more with it, but I wanted to kind of take everyone through the ideas and how it's built, and it is open source and a little bit on the code. It's all there to cut and paste and build your own one with your own podcast or whatever else you like. Okay, I'm going to share my slides and get started. Cool, okay. So this is using an AI approach called retrieval augmented generation, RAG, lots of fancy terms, and we'll get into what that means in a minute. But what it's going to do is make the podcast interactive. So I am a huge sci-fi nerd, super into a particular writer, this guy called Ian M. Banks. I was very lucky to get the gift of a set of books recently. And I kind of got back into this author because he writes extensively about artificial intelligence. And I found his ideas kind of inspiring, especially the idea that, this is the science fiction idea, that you could upload your brain or your mind state into a machine of some sort, send it halfway across the universe, and then other people could have a conversation with you. And what we do in the podcast is we have conversations with people, but it'd be kind of cool if you're a listener to also have the same conversations and ask your own questions. And yeah, we're kind of living in sci-fi now, and you can kind of, sort of, almost do that with this RAG approach. Yeah, so what happens in the culture is you can record your mind state, take a reading of someone's personality, and then, just like any file, right, it can be stored, duplicated, read, transmitted, installed. So that's what we're doing, right? We are making science fiction real, which is kind of cool. Okay, so what are we trying to do? The podcast is on developer relations. We talk to a whole bunch of people. If you go to the page, you'll see a big long list, and you can kind of categorize it, that sort of stuff. But it'd be really nice if you could ask people like Christina, who's there, all about things like, you know, the questions I just asked, right? How do you move an organization towards empathy? Or any other questions that you can think of. So what we did is we added this little chatbot to the homepage. This is the implementation. This is my safe version of a demo where I do screenshots. And if you've ever worked with me, you know that's my preferred form of demo. I always recommend to colleagues that they take screenshots, even if they're going to do a live demo, because you never know. So here's an example, right? What is developer relations? And then just like with ChatGPT, it will come up with an answer. And if you ask it again, it'll come up with something different. Obviously, my little chatbot is not going to be quite the same quality as ChatGPT, but it's not doing too badly. Here's a different question, right? Why does community matter? So these answers are coming from the collection of all the different answers that guests have given over all of the episodes. We're going to release a new version soon that actually has citations, and we'll point you at the right podcast. For now, it just kind of mushes them all together. And another question, right? So I have this particular question because I know that I discussed this specifically with a guest. So I'm sort of testing to see, it's not just hallucinating, it's actually extracting information that really is there. Okay, so how do you build this? It turns out it's not that hard. All the pieces are kind of there, and there's a huge amount of open source and cloud services and all that sort of fun stuff. Okay, so we're going to go through the design, a little bit of code, and then some of the practicalities around this if you want to do this a bit more seriously. So the requirement is we're going to take the podcast audio and we're going to build a chat interface that responds like a podcast guest. We have about 140 episodes, 30 minutes of audio for each episode. You do a transcript, there's about 7,000 words on average. We do 2 episodes a week, and you have metadata like the guest's details and show notes and all that sort of stuff. So this is the data set that we're working with. There's 2 things we want to implement. One is what's called ingestion, which is we get the audio and the metadata and we put it into the machine somehow. And then the querying, where we ask questions and you get responses, the conversational responses that you've just seen. Okay, so let's do the software architecture, 64,000 foot view, boxes and arrows. Ingestion consists of taking the audio, turning it into a text transcript. Then you got to do something called embedding, which turns the text into a series of numbers, a series of vectors. You use a model to do that. And then you store it in a vector DB. And the reason you do that is so that your searches will be searches on meaning, not keywords, because that's what you want, right? If you just did old school free text search like Elasticsearch used to do, you won't really get high quality answers because that doesn't capture meaning. The querying side is actually kind of similar, right? The question comes in, you embed it again using this model. So the question gets turned into these vectors of numbers. You then use that as the query with the vector DB, which then finds content that means the same thing. That's the context. And you put it all together as text. This is the text that you would then enter into ChatGPT, for example, to get a reply. So instead of just asking a 1-sentence question, you're generating 1,000 words of context, let's say, for the LLM. And that's why it can answer questions specifically about developer relations. Now, this all seems like hard work, right? In particular, if you're thinking about it and you've used ChatGPT, you might say, well, why bother with all this vector stuff, right? Let's just concatenate all the transcripts, chuck them into ChatGPT, and off we go. Why can't we just do that? Well, the main problem is, especially with the current systems, that's too much information. The LLMs can only handle a small amount of tokens. It's getting bigger, but even so. The other thing is that you're not using the data to its full effect. The nice thing about vector search is that you're focusing on the meaning that's closest to the question. If you put a large context into an LLM, the LLM is not going to be as effective at focusing in on the specific meaning. They may get better at it, but for now, the best approach that we found is to use the vector DB to do that as well. So what is this embedding thing? Right? You're taking human text and you're turning it into concepts, right? This is what these models do, and the representation of the concepts is just a whole load of numbers. The neural network spits them out after it gets trained. It doesn't really matter what the numbers are, but the core concept is that these numbers are vectors which represent space, right? Here I'm showing you a two-dimensional space, but in reality, these are very large spaces with thousands and thousands of dimensions. So when you type in a question like, is Rex a dog's name? It gets turned into a vector in the space, and hopefully it ends up near the set of concepts to do with canine things, right? To do with dogs. And hopefully they're all, and when I say space, I literally mean close together in a sort of physical space. Except it's not 3 dimensions, it's thousands. And you can see there's another space for feline concepts, and hopefully we don't end up there. And if you want to do more research yourself, right, this is one of the big algorithms here is called K nearest neighbors. And yeah, you kind of need to do it. You really should do a data science degree or something like that if you want to get into that side of it. Luckily, you don't need to know how it works because it's all being turned into wonderful APIs. So as developers, we can make use of the stuff without knowing how the mad science actually works. The vector databases are a critical part of this. So there's a whole load of them. The one that I'm using in this example is OpenSearch. One of the things we're going to do is refactor it to use Weaviate just to show how to use different vector databases. It's early days. They all offer a whole range of different features. I would say go out there and experiment. Large language models are the underlying neural networks that implement things like ChatGPT. I'm sure many of you have used ChatGPT at this stage, right? So I asked ChatGPT what an LLM is, and it gives you a great example. A little bit of background on these, right? They're very large neural networks. They use something called the transformer architecture, right? Which consists of this vector embedding. It cares about the order that words come in, and it cares about the context that the words are in. And the technical term for this is attention. And there's a very famous paper that came out in 2017 called "Attention is All You Need," and that was kind of the practical explanation of how to build these things. And all this wonderful stuff that we have now pretty much comes from that paper. Okay, so back to boxes and arrows and software architecture, retrieval augmented generation. How does that work? So we take our question, we get our retrieved context, right? From the vector DB, we turn that into a prompt, we send it to the LLM, and we get our generated stuff back. And you can see that there's a couple of levers that you can kind of pull to improve it. Right? You can get better vectors if you have a better way to create context. Your prompt can be engineered, right? Which is a fun new little developer skill where you change the text and hopefully get better answers. Or you can use better models, right? So they're getting better all the time, faster, larger context windows, all that sort of stuff. Okay, let's look at a little bit of code to actually implement this. This is all open source, like I said, so I'm just going to give snippets, but if you want to see the real code in action, it's all on GitHub. I'll give you the links later. So I love microservices, wrote a book on them, so of course it's going to be a microservice system. So let's look at 2 microservices that implement both sides of this problem, the ingestion and the querying. So we have an ingestion microservice, which has 2 messages. Transcribe an episode and ingest the transcript. And then we have a chat microservice, which creates the prompt and sends it as a query to the LLM. So when we're ingesting, we need to transcribe the episode, which means we get the audio, and then we need to turn that into text. And this is where things are wonderful these days because you can use services that just do speech to text. And in my code, I'm using DeepGram, which has an API to do that. Fantastic developer relations, super easy to use. It made this part of the task completely trivial, right? It's interesting. Some people that I talk to about this find this part to be really impressive, but it's literally 5 lines of code, and you get a transcription. Ingesting is a little bit more interesting. So this is the code that goes with that architecture diagram I showed you. So we're going to load up the transcript, which is text. We're going to turn it into chunks. And so these are smaller pieces. Imagine they're paragraphs or individual answers from the guest. And then we embed each chunk into the vector DB. So when we do our vector DB search later, what we get back is these chunks, which then are used to form the relevant context. This chunking operation, you can do all sorts of fun stuff here, like make them overlap. There's lots of ways to improve the efficiency and the quality of your answers by how you create these chunks. But basically, it's just a for loop at the end of the day over your text. And then actually asking the question, right? So we get in the query text. What is developer relations? We have to turn that into a vector. We can do the similarity search on our vector DB, which gives us the context. The context is just the list of chunks. And then we create a prompt for the LLM, right? Answer the question with context. Cut and paste in the context, text, and then your question. And then you invoke the LLM just as you would if you were manually typing it into ChatGPT, and you get your answer back. And that's it. It's actually pretty straightforward. And you don't need to understand anything to do with neural nets or data science or any of that fun stuff. You can just use APIs. One of the things that we have in our system, which I highly recommend, is to have some sort of a REPL. Don't put your tests, don't build them as like unit tests, because the answers are different all the time. It's much more useful to be able to just manually put in loads of queries and see the results coming back as you tune the prompt. Okay, I did promise it was open source. I didn't write the original version myself. I put a link to the a sort of direct implementation that isn't microservice based. Thank you very much, Michael. It was fantastic for understanding how to build it, the first version. The Voxgig Podmind repo has our implementation, which is microservice based. And then I'm doing a series of blog posts. There's 2 out already, going into the details and explaining how it all works. It's MIT licensed, cut and paste and enjoy. Okay, let's talk about practicalities if you're going to actually do this. I'll start with recommending one of my favorite books on software engineering, Specialist by Charles Sale, which is, well, if you read it, you are about to come face to face with the champion privy buildie of Sangamon County. It is a very short book discussing the building of outdoor latrines. And it will teach you more about software engineering than any other book I've ever read. But I'll let you read it. The key message of the book is that the world is more complicated than it looks, and getting stuff to actually work in practice is a lot harder than you think. That's why software projects are often late. The other person I'd like to thank actually is a former colleague called Paul Savage, who has a really cool AI consultancy called brightbeam.com. And I wouldn't know how to do half this stuff if he hadn't dragged me into a few projects. So call out to Paul. Thank you very much. Okay. On the practicality side, once you start building this stuff, you'll realize that it is literally the Wild West. Christina, I know you actually live there, so this might resonate with you. Mental model of cactuses and tumbleweed and all that sort of stuff, and shootouts at noon, because this stuff, like any new technology, is totally crazy, right? This is a random comment from Hacker News, and I mean, you can't understand a single word of it unless you're deeply embedded in the space. I did a little glossary. If you're looking at this is up on SlideShare, these slides, but here's a glossary of all these different terms and what they all mean. It can be very intimidating at first if you're trying to build this stuff. You know, what do you need to know? What don't you need to know? The approach I took was to just follow an existing open source repository and just follow along with the code and ignore everything else, because it's just too much. You'll learn it by osmosis over time. This is where I started. You can start here as well. This is extremely straightforward, direct code, no nonsense, and it will basically teach you to build a RAG chatbot. Having observed a couple of these projects being built commercially, the other thing I would say is that it's not like traditional software engineering. So if you're building a chatbot system for someone, you might have a 3-month project that looks totally normal. You deliver it, and then the quality of the answers is terrible. I don't know if you recently saw, I think last week, there was a story about an Air Canada chatbot offering not hallucinating a non-existent refund. They were taken to court, and the judge made them pay the refund, even though it doesn't actually exist, right? Because the chatbot just hallucinated it. So you'll spend as much time adjusting and trying to make it better. And it's very difficult because it's not like software engineering. You don't incrementally burn down your bugs. A new prompt could totally break the system. So it's different. It's different. And a lot of our mental models and tools for building these types of projects are not as useful as all of that hard-won experience would make you think. So beware. If you want to improve the performance of these systems, then there's a whole bunch of different places that you look, right? It's not just a case of, horizontal scaling on Amazon. You need to worry about how you're embedding your questions. You need to worry about how the vector search is working. You need to worry about which LLM model you're using. The results aren't instantaneous. Generally speaking, right? The faster the results come back, the worse the answer. So this chart shows you, it's a little bit of a technical chart, right? But at the bottom, there's a thing called recall. And 0 is terrible answer, 1 is really good answer. And then the number of queries per second that you can perform, you can see it's a logarithmic scale on the left-hand side. So once you want your performance to go over sort of 95% accuracy, which a lot of people want in a commercial context, youch, right? The response time to the queries grows exponentially. So if you're building this for a commercial client, you have a communication challenge, because you have to explain how, the way you're used to signing a contract for all those features that absolutely have to be delivered, and you have to do user acceptance testing. Well, good luck with that this time, because it's a probabilistic statistical machine, and it can't guarantee results. And then the regression thing, I mentioned it previously, right? You change your chunking algorithm slightly and everything breaks. You change one word in a prompt and suddenly quality craters. We're not used to regressions like this, right? As software developers, if there's a regression, it's because we missed something in a unit test, and it's very embarrassing, but this is your life now. The other thing you'll find is that some clients and people that you're building this for may have slightly unrealistic expectations, right? A lot of these projects have started with a CEO who wants the sun, earth, moon, and stars, and you're not going to be able to deliver that. You might be able to deliver something that has business value, but expectation management is even more important than normal projects. And sometimes there are problems you just cannot solve. There was an interesting post by the open source developer who wrote Redis about a month ago, talking about how he really tried to get LLMs to do systems programming, right? And that means not just small code snippets, but understanding the whole context of a system and how you're supposed to put things together, essentially being able to do software architecture. And they fail miserably at that because they just don't have enough context. But for all those problems, for all those challenges, we're living in the future. I was skeptical for most of last year, but having got into the space now and having started to use it with all its flaws and all the difficulties and hallucinating refunds that don't exist, wow, right? And I'm kind of inspired by a quote from one of Ian M. Banks's books, right, about these systems and what they could ultimately be, right? Not an animal brain. I'm not even some attempt to produce an AI through software running on a computer. I'm a culture mind. We are closer to gods. We're quicker, We live faster and more completely than you do, with so many more senses, such a greater store of memories, and at such a fine level of detail. We are living in a sci-fi world. It's totally amazing. The nice thing about Ian M. Banks's books is that the AIs are benevolent, and they consider it bad manners to mistreat humans. So that's a much more hopeful view of AI than the Terminator, which I choose to believe in. Okay, thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it useful.
Not a bit terrifying, Richard.
Oh, we aim to be terrified. We aim to be terrified as well.
I did make a comment in it that you're really selling it. You change something and everything breaks.
But you can tell I find it fun, right?
Yeah,
I enjoy breaking stuff.
No, it was great, really. And this is my second time sitting through this talk, and I still got some new things out of it. So it is great, and your enthusiasm does come through. The future, I agree with you. I think last year everybody was kind of going, is it hype? What is it? What's the story? I agree with you. I see really, really useful uses, but I also totally accept the expectation gap. Coming back to Christina as well, the expectation. I think businesses are putting expectations on coders and on software developers and on AI builders, or that they need to really, really sort out the expectation gap. What do you think, Christina?
I wish we could say it louder for those in the back, because yes, I will, if anybody reads the blog that I wrote, the source content of all of this is what scares me the most. And I guess, Richard, I was going to ask you a question as an engineer developer that is building something that is AI driven. How does a developer enable a safety net for the source content that is constantly changing? And the reason I ask this is I have managed many different things, one of which was an entire database of content. And I can make a change with that content. How does a developer ensure that the AI picks up the change in a right amount of time? In a world that changes so constantly with the source, how is a group of people are we going to ensure that the accuracy of the information is actually there?
Yeah, you saw the slide I had about the Wild West, right? At the moment, we are 100% dependent on the AI companies. So to take another bit of inspiration from science fiction. So the Dune movies are out at the moment, right? And if anybody's read the original books, in those books there is no AI because it was stamped out. And the reason it was stamped out is because humans were using AI to abuse other humans. It wasn't that we had the Terminator and robot overlords trying to take over. It was that humans were using it to enslave other humans. And it was deemed too dangerous. And despite the fact that it's a feudal society, the restriction against using AI is still deeply embedded. So that's another possible future, is we get to the point where we realize this stuff is too toxic. And I know there is already, movement towards regulation and all that sort of stuff. Oh, I don't know. Good luck with that. You won't regulate this stuff. It's horribly, horribly powerful. I think I suffered last year from a little naivete around the fact that it couldn't match me as a coder as such. And that example with anti-res, the guy who wrote Redis, is a good example. But it actually doesn't matter, because it's still so possible to use it in so many different ways. And we can hope that there will be more jobs created out of it than not. But there's no guardrails. Yeah, there's no guardrails. So
scary.
I really, it's super scary. It is. And I mean, I think participation. If you care participate, because at least we'll have a voice. And maybe it'll become clear what. So there's a good story from a couple of years back about voting machines in Ireland. And Ireland we spent 250 million euros or something on voting machines that ended up in a warehouse and were never used. And it was a good example of citizen democracy, because machines were not safe. They were very easy to hack in the end. And there was you could phone up this government helpline and sort of let them know. I remember phoning them personally and going, "I'm a programmer and I do not want you to use these things. I'm scared of them. I want to vote with pencil and paper, please." So we can make a difference if we participate, if we know what's going on. So I don't think one should shun the technology. I think we should lean into it, because people like us who understand tech, or I don't know, we're not the last line of defense, but we can explain to others at least what's dangerous.
And I'll say, Sinead, to our conversation yesterday, and nobody else was there, but you'll understand what we were talking about. I think for me, what I interpret that as is that there is a very strong need for leadership in this role of technology, that not only focus on technology, but we have to get back to like that principle of there's people, there's process, and there's technology. And it can't just be about technology. We love the technology, it's amazing, but there has to be the process and the people that are going to enable. So you're saying we need to get involved. I'm the people in this, right? I need to be involved in shaping that, and leaders need to understand that it is a very cool feature. It is something that needs to be leaned into, but you cannot forget the people and the process that go along with that technology.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we need something like sorry, Sinead.
Sorry, and the process of getting the data and the foundations to be right. Like Richard built it on an archive of our podcast episodes, and we know who we spoke to, and we know the topics, and it's pretty defined. But I mean, there are data sets out there, Christina, and we were talking about them yesterday, and there are companies who really don't have a clue what is even in their databases. They might have acquired somebody, they don't even know what's in that, and yet they think, oh, build me this. So I think you're right. There's the tech can build it, but where's the process for verifying and for quality checking the foundation, as you say, Christina? And Rena had that question, or made the comment about get into data analysis, and it's not as daunting and stuff. And yes, there's data analysis, but there's also data quality, process management for data collection. There's so much. I think these could be the jobs, Richard, that you say you don't know what the jobs are going to be maybe in the future, but actually maybe they'll shift away from the tech and onto the process, the quality side of things, possibly.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know, right? There's this phrase in this area, human in the loop. I think it's sort of it's about papering over the cracks. I think one just to come back to your point, Christina, maybe we need something like after the nuclear weapons were invented, the scientists got together and did this doomsday clock. How many minutes to midnight. Maybe we need an AI one or something like that. I don't know. Right. But the issue with the science fiction side of it is, in the Ian M. Banks books, the AIs are so incredibly intelligent that they actually spend most of their time inside their own heads, because it's far more interesting than the real world. And there's this assumption that they're civilized, so it's good manners to look after humans, but the humans are still kind of pets. So Rena, you had, just to get more practical, you had a question around performance. So one thing that I felt would keep us safe is that these systems do need a lot of hardware to run. So it's not like they can proliferate that much. And I would have, if we'd done this talk yesterday, I would have been like, and then that's fine. But in preparation for this, I was just doing a little bit of checking the latest news, and somebody has just released a LLM where they took all those vectors, and I showed them to you on my slides. You know, they were like 10-digit numbers. And apparently you can convert all of them into 3 numbers, -1, 0, and 1. And the results are still pretty close, which means that you can drastically reduce the hardware needs for running this stuff potentially. Yikes! I'm still absorbing that one. I don't know where that leaves us. So, yeah. I think. Well, I mean, I'll just come back to if we're not participating, if we're not at the table, then you know, the usual thing that happens is, you know, tyrants start using the weapons. We've got to make sure that doesn't happen.
I don't know if you guys have seen the news out here. So in Arizona, there was for quite a while, I would say it was probably a good month and a half, end of 2023, a local mom actually went in front of our Congress and whatnot because she had gotten a phone call from her daughter that she was in dire need and support and needed help.
Yeah.
And it ended up actually being AI. So they've stolen her voice and basically used the AI to call the mom and try to hold her hostage at that time to paying. Like, to your point, Richard, it was for negative intent. But that just happened out here, and it was a huge deal. Obviously, I don't know what I would do if that happened for me and my children. But somebody needs to it. Like, that can't happen.
Yeah, I've heard. I didn't hear that particular case, but I have heard similar stories. I don't know. People are recommending that you have family code words or something. But I mean, great. Now we all have to practice information security at the kitchen table.
Yep.
Yeah, but the other thing,
that'd be the answer.
Your point, Richard, about participation, but also about the voting machines, is 2024 is the year of elections around the world, and we do not fully understand how to counteract effectively and quickly enough misinformation and deep fakes that are just, you know, so they're like, yes, I'm optimistic. I'm not a doomsday person about this, but I think we're starting from the back foot with some use cases.
Yeah, you're right. And what's the lesson? If you were around in the 90s building the first websites, it was all wonderful. We all thought it was going to be completely amazing and democratize information. Yeah, that didn't really happen, did it?
I'll say I've seen some companies, and this is where I will go with the solution. Design from a company perspective needs to include when they're using AI.
Yeah.
We, as a society, in my mind, need to holistically hold ourselves accountable to making sure that happens, because I'll tell you right now, I actually don't trust anything, not a single thing that's on the TV or on the news or on the internet, because I am a firm believer of, if I didn't see it, I don't know if it actually happened. And because of all of the tools that I know that are there, it's just as hard for me to believe. Now, again, I'm not going to make a conclusional opinion on something. I'll take in the information, but it's not going to drive my overall perspective. I'm not going to create my own values based on what I'm looking on the internet or this, that, or the other. But what I'm getting at is we need to help each other to know what's truth versus what's not. And I don't think that there's really anyone, like, we could, again, policies are just policies. Laws are just laws. Collectively, we could all help each other if we just had leaders that were putting in place where the designs included our ability to trust and have a true, honest experience when we know that it's not just something that was made up. I don't know. I just feel like there is that ownership on all companies that are going to in this next couple of years, because they will.
Yeah.
They all should have some kind of indicator that it is AI driven.
Yeah, that's a very, 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 that's a very, very good idea. We have warning labels for cookies, right?
Right?
How useless, right?
Because I think the ingredients on a packet of on food, you know, and allergens and stuff like that. So it's been done it's like food safety, but for AI, or for tech products.
Okay, I think we have we have used up our audience's patience a little bit, so we will draw things to an end. We have solved world hunger here, I think. Food labeling for AI is the way to go. No, but seriously, I think, yeah. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if you do see that. Thank you so much again, Christina, for talking.
Thank you, Christina.
So much.
Absolutely.
Really, really great talk. This is recorded, and we will put it up on the DevRel Meetup site as well, and all that if you missed bits of it. Okay, so thank you again to our sponsors, Contentful.com and PlantQuest.com. The next meetup is on Wednesday, March 27th, 2024, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Irish time. We will be wowed by Kira Carey of Cloudsmith and Becca Horrod-Weigel of Open Sourced. Looking forward to that one. Details will be published in advance on devrelmeetup.com, and of course all the previous talks are there as well. So thank you so much to everybody. Take care. Good day.
Thank you, Christina. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Richard. Well done. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.